My name is Paul Lampland, Green Cloud Studio. I'm an organizer for this event. 1 million cups happens in 56 cities across the U.S. The format is the same each. We have 2 speakers today that will speak for 6 minutes apiece, first giving us an overview of their business, and then for 20 minutes we get to give them constructive feedback and ask challenging questions. We like that the speakers not shows just the shiny side of their business, but be also vulnerable, a bit vulnerable, so that they can really give us a feel for what their business entrepreneurship is like. We're going to start out today with Austin from Export Abroad.
Hi everybody, my name is Austin. Like you said, I'm from Export Abroad, and we are Internationalization as a Service. Now, you might be wondering, what the heck does that mean? Well, I used to work at the US Commercial Service, where I helped small to medium-sized companies expand internationally, and every single one had the same issue. They all had attempted to go internationally, but they quickly realized that there was too many processes to manage, between finding a logistics provider, managing paperwork, finding foreign partners. It quickly became extremely cumbersome for their team to be able to manage all of that. So that's why they came to the commercial service for the help. And they also realized that opportunities were hard to find, and then executing on them were even more difficult. And the current methods it essentially takes you at least 6 months just to get your product to port if you want to do it right. So the research takes at least 2 to 6 weeks, another 2 months to find a distributor, and then you have all the miscellaneous items that are going to take you another 3-4 months. I mean, it can be a very long process. Everyone's still doing mostly everything on Excel, phone, and fax. It's extremely archaic processes. Had they been using Export Abroad with our big data focused platform, we could help them test new markets in 2 months. So we have a big data market research tool that generates highly tailored reports for companies in a matter of minutes. And then right now we're building our international network of service providers that we can provide access to our customers. So what that means is that we end up being this one-stop shop for everything exporting, because we have service providers around the world that if something that's not in our wheelhouse, we can send it to our European branding. I don't know anything about that, but we have a partner that does. So like I said, our market research is already automated. That's our first product. And we're building our network of global service providers. The first place we're actually going to target is emerging markets, because we think it's somewhere that Western companies don't do particularly well, and it's where our team happens to have expertise. And the market is huge on this. In the US alone, companies are spending over $70 billion, and globally they're spending over $170 billion on export research and brokerage. So it's a massive market, and people are willing to pay for it. So the benefit of working with us is that we can help you explore new opportunities and optimize your current markets. Exploring new opportunities is mainly for the little guys. They don't know where to go. Maybe they're selling one-off products to Canada, but this is really to help them explore where their options are around the world. Optimizing current markets are for the big guys. So for one of our customers, they have a presence in 60 countries, and they actually came to us and said, hey, it's an inherent risk for us to ship overstock from a country where a product is performing poorly to where it's performing well. So we want to make sure that the economics make sense, that by the time our product gets from the Philippines, our jackets get from the Philippines to Norway, that it's still going to fly off the shelves and there's going to be demand. And because we're pulling data on a daily basis, we can tell that. We can find those types of trends. So an example report will have things like economics, statistics, competitor analyses, cultural nuances, even potential buyers and partners. So the example you see here is actually we were vetting a specific country for one of our customers. And we can provide everything because we're storing everything from what languages they speak there, their population, and their top trading partners. So it's a nice looking report that's going to make you stand out from the competition and make you feel really good about where you should be targeting. And we've seen some pretty good growth. We started with our alpha in June, July with about 10 companies and 20 to 30 users. We just passed over 100 users. We've seen 3x growth since August. We have a Fortune 500 paying customer. We have some pretty big deals in our pipeline right now that should be hitting within the next 6 to 12 months. Enterprise takes a little while. So the way that we make money is, on one hand, we partner with service providers that act as resellers of our market research. We rev share with that, and we automate a revenue stream for them. Manufacturers, we sell market research for a flat rate, and then when we actually help them execute, it's a flat rate per service, and then when we're successful, we get a small margin on the wholesale cost of our shipment. So it's a pretty straightforward model. The competitive landscape is a little interesting. On one hand, you have these trade platforms like Alibaba. Low cost, but they're also low quality, right? So there's so much noise in Alibaba, most companies don't know how to sift through the noise and who's legitimate and who has high quality stuff. We actually like to say Alibaba is all about manufacturers waiting for inbound inquiries, and we're all about manufacturers being proactive about their growth, and we want to actually work with them to help them grow. In terms of market research, you have McKinsey. High quality and expensive, but how many companies can actually afford McKinsey, right? The Fortune 500s, maybe Fortune 1000s. So the sweet spot is to be affordable and high quality, which is where export abroad falls into. And our advantages are that we have increasingly automated processes. As we build our network, everything becomes quicker and quicker because we're going to be establishing even better relationships with our partners around the world, so we can execute even faster as we go. We have proprietary algorithms and processes, database of global partners, and we have emerging markets expertise. Our team, I'm Austin. I used to work at the commercial service, also worked at Delta Cargo, started a couple companies before. My co-founder, he's our CTO. He has his master's in bioinformatics out of Madison, so he's a big data guy. Previously managed international startup tech teams. He has years of logistics experience. Everybody ships code, so we're definitely a tech-heavy team. Everybody ships code, whether it's in R or what our stack is. So I love our team. We also have a great advisory team. So we have the ex-chief of staff from the US Department of Commerce, we have professors at Stanford, and we have data innovation statisticians at the World Bank. So they're really helping us make sure that our product progresses along and that we can continue to execute and be the highest quality that's possible. So I'm looking for feedback on where you think some pitfalls might be of our company, things that we need to potentially watch out for. The other thing is I'm looking for if you've ever done anything internationally before, what were some of the issues that came up for you and how'd you address them? I'm looking to figure out ways that, basically we're writing software to automate as many of the headaches that can be automated for international expansion. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, when I was at the commercial service, I was a lowly intern, so I had to do all the market research by hand. So literally, I was sitting there all day, every day for 8 hours, literally copying and pasting data. And this is what people still do. They copy and paste data from World Factbook, World Bank, whatever, into Excel, and then you write a model on it. And I was like, I can make a computer do this. I can churn out these beautiful reports with graphs and everything like that. Because I'm not, my background isn't formally in tech, but I code. So my formal background is in international economics. So that's kind of where it came from.
So you guys help companies do research for potential export markets. Do you help them also go through the export process?
Yeah, so that's what we're moving towards right now. So our first partners that we've been finding have been mostly in South America and then Eastern and Southern Africa, and that just happens to be because my co-founder's from Rwanda, so he has a pretty extensive network there, and he grew up in a logistics family over there. So yes, we're actually helping them execute. We needed to niche down though, because if you go for the whole world right away, we were finding some issues with basically being spread too thin, right? So we're building that network up, and we want to help them execute and actually, find buyers, find retailers, compliance guys that are all going to help them get into those markets.
Who's doing business development?
Me. So I'm most of the business development. So right now we have. So we just got back from about 3.5 months in Silicon Valley, just kind of fleshing out our product and going through an accelerator. And then but the interesting thing is most of our customers are coming out of the Midwest and the Rust Belt. These American legacy companies, they just sell to America, maybe one-offs to Canada, and they need to have an international strategy in order to stay afloat. Sorry.
You said you went through an accelerator?
Yeah, we went through Hackers and Founders. It's yeah.
How do you convince prospects that they can trust the relationships that you are helping them through or navigate through?
Absolutely. So right now, the way that we rely on the relationships is solely through either personal connections or that we actually know the person ourselves or someone that we trust. The easiest way in order to be able to make them trust them is mostly, quite honestly, if they're a pretty big company and they're already being a distributor or a reseller of other American goods. So like, for example, one of the ones out of Tanzania that we have is like they're reselling Coke and all these different things. Like, oh, you want to work with Coke's distributor, right? Like, also the first issue that you do run into though is getting that first success story from that distributor, right? Because then you have a lot stronger argument. So that is an issue that we've been running into, because the biggest issue in international trade is the trust factor, right? Because I don't really have any legal recourse if, other than maybe my escrow payment, right? If I ship something to somewhere and they don't pay me, right? So, yeah, that's definitely an issue that we're trying to address, but mostly it's been because we actually know the people ourselves, so we can vouch, I guess you could say. So I guess then it becomes the trust falls on us, right? So I'm not particularly, I know there's probably a better way to do it, but we haven't really fleshed that out quite yet.
So tell me about how you approach a business on kind of, at the get-go. So you have manufacturing here in the U.S., they're distributing in the U.S., maybe they're distributing widgets, and there's an opportunity for them to go to Tanzania or South America or Europe, Eastern Europe, or wherever that is.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start that conversation? Where did they get started? And then kind of walk me through the process.
Yeah, so the process is, first, the way that we normally approach them is actually, so we kind of have we have what we call limited reports and then the full reports that our tool generates. The limited reports, limited data set, gives you your markets, but it doesn't really say too much else, right? Maybe what the GDP has been doing and what, and we always show what the imports are, because the imports are very, 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 very important. I guess one thing I forgot to specify is that our market research tool is product specific, so we can do any product anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter where you are, because of this glorious thing called harmonized tariff codes, which basically classifies products so the customs official knows what's in the can when it's coming on the ship, and that's how they assess taxes and tariffs. So we can go in there and knowing you can figure out what products that they're making. We can go in there and say, okay, you're making industrial air conditioning. Here's where your top markets are. Here's a little bit of information. Would you want to see more? Or would you actually want to explore some of these opportunities? Sometimes you get no, we're happy with what we have now, and then the argument kind of becomes like, what are you doing to combat overseas manufacturing and the lower costs and things like that? And some guys, if they make premium products, they don't really. If they make highly tailored premium products, they tend to not have that issue as much, but people like with industrial air conditioning, you're going to run into price differentials that are pretty substantial unless you, but there's still demand elsewhere for it. So that's really kind of how we approach them, and if we don't really like to give the hard sell, because we like to think that we can present these opportunities in such a way that it makes it interesting for them. Like, it's very, very interesting because most people don't even realize, like, international trade is like this massive thing where even the most obscure products are doing probably in their top markets $1 billion a year, right, in trade in one single country. So that's kind of how we approach it.
So you can identify, so based on different markets, based on the specific widget, you'd say there are more of these widgets going to France than anywhere else in the world. you know, so you basically say, you know, like, what part of your product is being imported? You know, like, are you showing like the, you know, the loss of or are you also identifying other opportunities where like, so this is a similar market, but there isn't a lot going on here, and where is the opportunity?
So what we actually look for, one of the more important things is, so sometimes the markets that have the largest amount being imported aren't the best because there's high competition. So actually we have competitive algorithms that we run. And then we can say, okay, so the competition is high in France, it's a massive market, but you're a little guy, it's better suited for big companies that have more money to throw at it. You're a little guy, you should go to this one where growth has been systematically increasing over the last 3 years, right? That's a better market. So we look at historical trends. We do regression analyses on, like, you know, from the 90s and stuff like that. When were companies successful and why, and things like that. So we look at a multitude of different things, and normally we classify them if they're small or a big business because they have a different sort of competitive characteristic, right? So.
What would it run then? So you said that there's like the, you know, like the snippet where you can do a smaller report or the full report.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like I target small businesses, what does it run to get the analysis done and then, you know, step into the next level of helping get that?
So,
what does it cost?
So actually what we end up doing is right now we're in the middle of productizing the service in terms of we're going towards a SaaS model where they can do 1 report a month and monitor 3 products at a time because we do trend analysis. We pull data from every single major port. What's going into every single major port around the world on a daily basis? It's like 50 gigs a day. So we're productizing that right now. What we're envisioning is for the lowest about a couple $100 a month, the highest closer to 1,000. And then for our enterprise, it's about 10 to 25,000 a year, depending on what they want, because we do custom algorithms for them. So it's 10 to 25,000 a month, sorry, for those guys. So.
Can you talk more about where you're getting that information from?
Yeah. So the very interesting thing is that most of this data is publicly available. It's just highly fragmented. And actually, thanks to open government initiatives, there are APIs that we can plug into. So we pull from 20-something different sources right now. I mean, World Bank, World Trade Organization, everybody knows. The Fed, Federal Bank. We're pulling from foreign governments where, for whatever reason, they don't report to the World Bank very well. So we have to fill in our database with those because your data is only as good as how much that you have, right? Some of the things we have to pay for. We have to pay for import stats. We have to pay for that real-time stuff that I was talking about. But the nice thing is that there's a lot of data suppliers out there, but there's not too many people doing data insights in this industry, right? Like you can go buy a data set, but the issue is that you still need to know what to do with it, right? So that's where we get.
We have 25 proprietary databases that business librarians help people with, but you do it internationally, and it's just great. So, is your model? Do you think you're going to see more growth in in putting the general information out there that people want to subscribe to, or specifically with a topic or product or widget that you're talking about? So
it'll be definitely like the specific because. A lot of people, they want to know exactly about their product. So when we go in, because the nice thing is we based our, when they run a query or when they do a search, it's based exactly on what their product is. Up to the level of I make shelves that are, 50% plastic, 50% wood, right? Like it gets down to the composition like that. So you know, oh, that's my product, right? So that's where people are more interested. And that's why, like I said, we're productizing it right now where you can monitor your product line and see a couple reports a month. Because the thing that we're finding out is companies don't do market research. We thought they would want to do market research. Like, I'm such like a data nerd. I want to pull this stuff on a weekly or monthly basis. But they do, especially the small guys do, they normally go on a quarterly basis. So they'll say, okay, is our strategy still good? Things like that. So the way that we productize that is by having this service that constantly monitors for them. For example, you sell, we'll go to the table example, Kazakhstan has hit their numbers, they've imported more in the last month than they did in the last 3 years combined. There's a trend happening here. You should hop on that, right? So that's the type of thing that we'll be alerting them to.
From the quad chart you showed earlier, it looks like you're well positioned with respect to your competitors. So how do you keep your competitive advantage? Is it your data sources, your proprietary algorithms, or anything like that?
It's the proprietary algorithms. It's just execution too. So the other nice thing is that there's not too many people that are moving into there's a lot of data analytics going on right now, but in terms of our industry, no one is incentivized to really iterate or improve the way that they're doing business, because mostly everybody in the industry makes money hourly, so they're incentivized to have this process that takes 2 to 6 weeks, or they're a big company, so they just have internal teams that are doing this. So that's kind of how we keep our competitive advantage. I mean, for the big guys, they could probably build a similar thing. We are patent pending. I'm not a huge fan of software patents, but it's a little bit of a moat, I guess you could say. And it also, it's a sales tactic for us, quite honestly, too. So we can, people like that you have a patent in our industry. So
Austin, you're talking a little bit about that. But talk about the sweet spot of the companies that are, it might not be the 3M because they might be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it is. Talk about the sweet spot.
So our sweet spot in terms of the smaller businesses are people that make B2B products, specifically like products that don't have any consumer preference, right? We have consumer preference data, but consumers are very finicky. But like I said, with the industrial air conditioning, if my industrial air conditioning works and it's for a good price, I'm willing to buy it, and I don't really care where it comes from as long as it's working and it's gonna operate for me. Things like lights, things that you don't really think about. Scrap metal. We know guys that are trading scrap metal from torn down casinos in Nevada to Japan and China that are, they're doing like $30 million a year. So that's our sort of sweet spot. In terms of the larger guys, the classic American brands. So American brands in terms of normally they have like operational equipment, tooling, things like that. They're these massive companies, they have a global scale, but they want to monitor that they're making sure that they're executing in the right markets. So our first Fortune 500 customer, we have 3 different algorithms that they want us to build. Making sure that they're, for retail, brick and mortar, are they in the right markets on that? Where should they be going to? E-commerce opportunities, and then real-time trends. Because if there's a trend happening in the Philippines and they don't have enough, they need to send more stock there, they want to know about that before anybody else does, right? So they can be the ones that are taking advantage of this trend. Maybe whatever, their parkas are selling well in the Philippines for some reason, right? And no one else has them there, so that's sort of our core sweet spots.
I think you mentioned this a little bit, but is the only thing you feel that's holding you back is your track record or just not having enough?
Yeah, also, quite honestly, a little bit on our, I guess you could say on our traction too, in terms of we have a pretty long sales cycle. So we've been at this about 11 months now, since early January. I quit my job in February. So that's, probably the track record a little bit, but also just more so our sales cycle. We're very close on a lot of deals, but that can, in terms of enterprise and just B2B sales in general, it can mean, so that's also why we're productizing to try to shorten that sales cycle a little bit so we can sell through the web a little bit easier. I also, in a past life, I also did a lot of web marketing. So I used to manage, online marketing for a bunch of companies around here. So we're testing that out as well. But you can't have, you can't have anything over, people won't buy, the rule of thumb is if it's over $500, they won't buy, just it needs a personal touch, right? So.
You mentioned the proprietary algorithms that you're developing for one of your customers. Is that something that you just kind of keep creating a library for customers?
So the very interesting thing is the thing that we realized that originally we were going to actually sell those algorithms to them, but then we realized that we couldn't sell it to their competitors, right? If we sold off our IP for them, we couldn't sell it to their competitors. So actually part of this productization as well is separating the inputs from the formula, right? So we'll have these formulas, our brick and mortar formula, our e-commerce formula, and then they give us their custom plugins, and that's how we lock them into our system too. So they have to pay us for the development up front of that and implementing their custom algorithms. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to be an ongoing process because they probably don't have an API, I'm guessing, that we could just continually pull from, but that's how we're doing that, is that productization. And I think that's actually going to be it's going to be one of the core pieces that I'm glad that we realized early, because once we tried to sell to one of their competitors, we would have realized if we sold off our IP, we couldn't. So
are you talking to the marketing department, or are you talking to the distributor? I mean, what part of the company?
Our sort of segue initially is actually sales guys, because they tend to have pull with sales, or they tend to have pull with money. So they can say, hey, I need this in order to figure out where I should be doing my cold calls, or I should be looking for partners. And then from there, we actually end up going into global ops, at least in the bigger companies, right? Some of the smaller ones, it's probably the sales guy, and then it probably goes to a C-level, like the C-suite. But in terms of the big guys, you end up going to global operations. There's actually, most of these companies, they have people that are doing global expansion analysis. They actually have teams of it. I know at a lot of these companies, they have teams of it. So, and for Fortune 500s, we're also sort of we're a cost savings play as well, because they don't have to have somebody constantly analyzing this, right? We're even thinking about going after, this is a total side note, but going after some of the airlines, because they are constantly looking for, where should we be flying to next, right? And we happen to have that type of data too. So there's a lot of different sort of avenues. We just need to make sure that we're niche enough at the time being that we can dominate that and then expand from there.
That's all the time we have right now for questions.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Austin.
Thanks.
We do have one more question we always ask every presenter, and that is, how can 1 million cups help you?
So right now, as the main thing that I'm really looking for right now is I just want to talk to more manufacturers about, so we're building this as we're productizing our service. We want to make sure that it's going to be something that passes the toothbrush test. In terms of, you use your toothbrush every day, we want you to come to our tool every day. So I'm just been reaching out to manufacturers and saying, hey, I'm just interested in talking to hear about what you're interested in looking at on a daily basis, what in terms of data or things happening around the globe. So really what I'm hoping is just talking to anybody that's in the manufacturing space, having something manufactured in China, I just want to talk to more manufacturers is really what it comes down to. So, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Angel Adams. I founded the Pediatric Device Center, and I wanted to come here and talk to you guys about kind of what we're doing and get some of your feedback. So a lot of people don't know this, but out of the global medical device market, only 5% is dedicated to pediatrics. I saw this need when I was volunteering as a marketing manager for a nonprofit pediatric device company here in Minnesota. And I said, how can we raise awareness and get more manufacturers and more OEMs to create these devices? So I thought of a pediatric tax credit. I created a LinkedIn group and invited a bunch of people, and all of a sudden we had 3 bills by the end of the summer that were both bipartisan bills that will be introduced in January. The other is an angel investor tax credit, and then we have the Pediatric Innovation Program, which we're asking the state of Minnesota for $10 million to develop pediatric devices. From that, I started getting calls from companies all over the world wanting to partner, offering discounted services, whether it was in manufacturing, R&D, commercialization. And I said, wow, I literally can take a product from concept to market at a discounted rate. And the reason why companies don't develop pediatric devices is because of costs. If you think about a stent, if it takes Boston Scientific $10 million to develop an adult stent, for the market for a 3-year-old that needs a stent that size, $10 million, a market this small, there's no money in it. So they're not going to develop those devices. They're going to makeshift those devices to fit the kids. And parents don't know this. I wanted to kind of give you guys a visual, because it is a very complicated process why it hasn't been solved yet. But if you look at where ideas come from, I mean, parents have thought of ideas, doctors, nurses, companies, engineers. Where do you go if you have an idea for a device? Where do doctors go? I mean, they'll call R&D companies, hey, I have this idea for a device, I know it'll work on a child, where do I go? And they really don't have anywhere to go except institutions, but then you would need federal funding. So even if you got funding, you can get it from investors, which there are hardly any investors, why we have the angel investor tax credit in Minnesota. And an investor's not going to invest in a market that's this small. So even if they got, if they got funding, then you go to development costs and manufacturing and tooling costs. I mean, it costs $9,000 just to build a tool for injection molding. So you think about all those costs, and then clinical trials. And even in the US, what parent is going to let their child go through clinical trials? And so a lot of those trials are done overseas, and the FDA hasn't recognized those trials because there's not enough research and there's not enough data on those trials. So if you think about research that was done, in India, they're not up to the FDA standards, and that's kind of what they think too. And so then you come back, let's say you get through clinical trials and it gets approved, then you have more manufacturing costs. Then how do you distribute that? How do small companies who make pediatric devices hire sales guys to distribute to all these small markets all around the world? Because if you look at it in the fact of the cardiovascular market for pediatrics next year is predicted at $1.3 billion. But yet you'd have to hit every small market all around the world. So let's look at 25 Class 3 devices. Class 3 devices are implantable, so pacemakers, stents, heart valves. We had 25 approved from 2008 to 2011 here in the US. 22 of those, they eventually qualified to be used in pediatrics, but only one of them was ever tested on any child under the age of 18, and that could have been someone who was 17 years old. So this is a big problem that we've tried to solve by getting federal funding, which we've given $19 million to 8 of the federally funded consortiums, pediatric consortiums around the US, and they've only come out with 2 products since 2009. Something's not working, and so I decided to create a global database. And what that global database does, it'll provide an online pediatric searchable database so that any clinic, any hospital, anywhere in the world can look under pediatric specialty and find out what devices are available and be able to order those devices through the companies. And distribution was, one of the biggest problems, and that's one of the first things that we're rolling out in the portal. Second is the access to pediatric research. We've actually had a conference call with the FDA about 2 weeks ago, and I'm very lucky because I met them at a pediatric conference in DC, and they are wanting to work with the PDC to do a needs assessment to find out what is needed in the pediatric world, but then also taking the data and research from other countries. So I have been partnering with companies in Singapore, India, UK, Germany to take their data, bring it here, work with the FDA, because that's the biggest problem is we haven't been able to work with them. It's hard to get individual contacts in the FDA, put it that way. And so they want to work with us to figure out what the needs are and to get those devices to market, but then also to get those devices approved in the US. The other biggest problem, as you can see with that pediatric roadmap that I kind of showed you, was the cost of everything. So what I have done is I've partnered with companies who are in R&D, manufacturing, IP, research and development, preclinical companies. I have a company here, a sterilization company here in Minnesota that's offering 50% off all sterilization and validation for any pediatric devices that come through the PDC. That saves companies $40,000 a year just to have their devices packaged, sterilized, and validated. I'm also working with a preclinical company here in Minnesota that does animal studies, and they're willing to give discounted services for all pediatric devices. So what I found was when you partner with everyone to solve a problem like this, it reduces the cost significantly, and you're able to now work through that roadmap in a more efficient, more cost-efficient way. So this is kind of how we operate. So I've actually created, I have an engineering manager from Covidian. It's all volunteer at this point, but we're working with our IP lawyers to get so that engineers who are volunteering can actually own part of the IP that they're creating. So let's say a doctor comes up with an idea. We have an engineering team in Minnesota, we have one that we're starting in Chicago, and we have one that we're starting in Michigan. And we're hoping to spread that out throughout the country. They meet in an incubator space at a medical device R&D company with those doctors. They're given the resources to create a non-working prototype. From that non-working prototype, we're now able to go to the R&D companies that we partnered with to get those non-working prototypes to actual working prototypes. And then we're working with manufacturing companies, whether it's injection molding or precision machining, to give discounted services to get those manufactured. And then we have hospitals. I actually just talked to one of the leading cardiologists from Medtronic, who works with Medtronic, and they want to bring us to India. I have a company in Singapore. I'm working with companies in UK and Germany to bring these devices to those countries to use for clinicals. And then these are pretty much all of the resources that we have. And then you come down here to commercialization. Now those products, once they're approved, we're able to put those on the portal so that they're now searchable. And the hardest part is that companies like Medtronic, Boston, Covidian, they're not really too keen on this idea, because now their product is sitting right next to a small company's product on the portal, and they're so used to having a big part of the market. And Medtronic kind of said to me, well, why would we want our product on there for right next to all these competitors? And I said to them, well, then your product needs to be the best, right? So it's going to create more of a fair competition within all of the companies, which is what we need, because it's not about, one product being out there. We want multiple products, because not everyone is going to resort to that one product, or not every doctor is going to like using that one device. And then we are also working with some people with the insurance reimbursement. So you can get all the way through that long process and get to market, and those doctors could be using those devices on kids, but yet the insurance companies won't reimburse them. And so we're working in legislation as well to come up with some kind of bill to make it, I guess, have access to more reimbursement. And how we operate and how we make money. So companies that, if you think of it this way, so let's say Revox is the company, they're one of the sponsors and members of the PDC. They're offering that 50% off all sterilization and validation. They paid roughly, a $2,500 membership for the entire year. Their company is now listed on the portal. They get one device through the portal. It more than pays for a membership. And the model actually works so well that the 7 federally funded consortiums want to switch to this model. I was actually at the conference. They don't want to rely on federally funded money anymore, because the federal government can give you money and say, here you go, here's money to innovate. Now you got to innovate in this little box, because we have all these steps that you have to follow. So companies will pay these memberships, and we don't want to fund companies or give resources without it coming back to the PDC, or that revenue that's used after commercialization to just go into another device. So we're asking them to do some kind of donation based off of the revenue that they generate to go back into the PDC. And we also want those engineers to benefit, because those engineers are spending a lot of time volunteering to develop these devices, but they're doing it because they've worked in companies that they've been working on a pediatric device. They understand the reasons we don't make them, and then the project will get cut right out from underneath them. And it's something where they just have a heart for what they do. They're engineers. They want to do engineering. And so that's kind of how the model is. And we've only been up and running for 2 to 3 months now. And I mean, we have over 6,300 followers on LinkedIn and companies from all over the world. So it's growing at a rate that I can't even keep up with. So I wanted to come here today, get some feedback. I know there's a lot of steps and a lot of things that I'm not the expert in all these areas, but I like to surround myself with those people who are experts in those areas. So I would love to get your feedback.
Wonderful.
Are you a one-person organization?
No, well, I was initially. No, you know what? I had a lot of writing the bills. The angel investor tax credit was written by another CEO on my team, and then the program was also another CEO of a medical device company. I have a lot of advisors within the medical device industry. And right now, the CTO of Devicix, who is an R&D company that is partnering with us, they're also the CTO of this. So he's handling all the IP and legal work because there's going to be a lot of IP involved. That's not my wheelhouse, so he's doing that. The engineering manager is from Covidian, like I said, and he's getting his master's, but he's also running the entire engineering team here in Minnesota. So there's a lot of advisors that are they just want to be involved, and a lot of people that have put in their input over the last couple months. So, I mean, it's kind of just me, but I mean, but it's growing so fast that we're adding on more people, and it's been a lot of fun.
From what you said, is it accurate to assume that there will never, the market will never be big enough for companies who want to just build pediatric devices themselves, or always has to be an incentive or some sort of subsidy?
Not necessarily. There actually is a market. There is a market for pediatric devices. It's the nature in which you think about, here's an example. There's a company that created a vascular pediatric device. They went through all of, first round funding, they got funding. They went through the process, they get to animal trials. And all of a sudden, they bring their device, a working device that they've already done everything for, into that animal study, and the people that run that study say, this is not going to work, and this is not small enough, or this is not. Now they have to go back and redo that device, and that doesn't happen just in pediatrics. That happens in adult devices as well. I mean, something upwards of 8 to 9 startups in medical devices fail because of those reasons. People are not starting their teams the way that they should be starting it from the beginning, and getting those advisors and working to develop these devices, and you can reduce costs so much. So it's not just pediatrics, because there's absolutely a market for it. It's just the manner in which people start their companies, and they don't bring in all those people they need to. So when it does get to clinical trials, they're not asking doctors. I mean, you think about, you can go all the way to commercialization. A doctor can say, this is so uncomfortable to use in an 18-hour surgery. I don't want to use this. You need to go back now and modify that device. So then that's when they contract out to other companies overseas, because now they don't want to pay for that modification. So it is more about coming together and collaborating as a globe, because this is a global problem, and bringing all those people together, but there absolutely is a market.
Do you have opportunities for partnership? Maybe I missed this with the state Medicaid agencies, because I know that there's been a lot of focus in the last number of years with children's programs and bringing like managed care into that, whether it's developmentally disabled or other similar programs.
So in what aspect? In the medical device or the reimbursement, or what?
Yeah, just in terms of their programs, just how they tie into this picture.
Yeah, so I was at the Mayo Innovation Conference, and the hardest part with working with those agencies and is the fact that they don't want to work with anybody, to be honest. And so it's really hard to kind of break into getting them to listen, because even with adult devices, there's so many devices out there that telemedicine, here's a prime example. So there's a lot of, telemedicine is going to be the next big thing in medical device, and not having to go to the doctor, but being able to talk one-on-one with a doctor through a TV, and being a parent or whatever the case may be. There are people in rural areas that can't drive or don't want to drive an hour to take their kid because they have a sore throat. Well, we are still not seeing any interest from those agencies to reimburse that, and so it doesn't, they are not innovators, so they're not going to look at a device or something that's going to help people and say, oh, this is the next big thing, or this is this is innovation. They don't care. They want, okay, how many people are using this? How much money is it going to make? It's one of those things that they're really hard to work with, and we're a long ways off from being able to really work with those, and work with those agencies, and legislation is kind of the only thing that's been kind of a way to penetrate that. So
You work with the University of Minnesota?
I do. I actually, Gwyneth Fisher, Dr. Gwyneth Fisher at the U of M, she started the Pediatric Device Consortium, and she actually was at the Capitol with us writing these bills. The hardest part for her is that all of these consortiums are tied to an institution or a hospital, so they get federally funded. So they are kind of tired of it because they want to be able to use this money in the way that they know that they need to use it, but they can't because of all of these steps that they have to follow. And so it is really hard for us to work with them. That's why they're all wanting to break off from those institutions.
Program. I know they're making a huge effort on this with their technology commercialization program. That actually, so if you have a small organization that needs research or other things that they can provide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we talk about our partnerships, the consortiums and the institutions are part of our partnerships because they're going to be able to bring in for clinicals and for research. The problem is now you bring those devices into institutions who have to own IP. And
this program, you can maintain ownership of that.
Which program is that?
If you talk to the technology commercialization office, they have a whole, they just started this about maybe 6, 8 years.
So you're talking about a small company, or who are you talking about?
You can bring in your technology.
Okay, so the small company, yes. If you're a doctor though, and you bring in your idea to the institution, then they will own that.
That's actually changed a little bit, but they own
It's in the works, because they actually want to change that completely to where any doctor that comes out with an idea out of a hospital, they own all of that, but right now it's not quite there yet. So that's why we have so many lawyers for IP, because that is a really big problem. You even look at like grad students and PhD students at the University of Minnesota that have the medical device center. So I was actually getting my master's in medical device innovation at the University of Minnesota this summer. And so we were the first program that if we came up with an idea, we got to own IP. Before, they would own anything that you would develop. So that's why IP is like one of those things that nobody wants to touch, but we kind of have to. And so it's a lot of meetings with the lawyers and figuring out, all right, all these scenarios, because there's so many scenarios that can come in to play, whether it's a small company, but what if that company comes in and their devices needs to be changed significantly, and the people that are at the institution, it's a lot of.
Angel, have you worked with Aspen Research at all?
I haven't.
And the reason I ask it is it's a company that tests all of these devices and whatever is coming about to make sure that they don't extrapolate into systems and all that kind of stuff. Is that important to what your whole business is up to and everything?
Absolutely, and that's honestly, we need every single part. We need every type of partnership. The validation testing and the verification testing, leak testing, packaging, sterilization, anything that you would need from the idea of that device to commercialization, we are trying to partner with. And we, it's fairly new still, but it's growing so fast that we have a lot of companies though that do multiple, they're like a one-stop shop in a sense, where they can do the validation testing, the verification testing, sterilization, packaging, and shipping, and they can store. So it's like, depends on the companies, but our sweet spot right now too is the smaller companies for R&D and for manufacturing, because the larger companies, if you look at even the bigger global companies, well, what do we care if we give, a discount, or why would we care about a tax credit? I mean, we don't need a tax credit. So it's one of those things that the smaller to medium-sized companies that are more specialized have been more of the people that have jumped on board right away. But we're hoping that eventually we can get those larger companies on board because of the nature of what we're doing. And they really can use our research. And their engineers, I mean, I've connected over 600 engineers at Boston Scientific, and they want to do this. They want to develop pediatric devices, but how do you convince corporate?
I have to mention that because my wife is at that company, and you guys should at least talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your network, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about their company.
So how do you go about getting in front of doctors who are going to be the end clients, right? It's like they're going to be going out here, finding the device.
Yeah, so that would be one avenue. So normally with doctors is so if you think about, they makeshift adult devices. So you can get an adult device if a child's getting maybe a heart valve or they're getting some kind of surgical procedure done. And they're using this device and they're like, this is so big. They just, how do we make it smaller? But they don't really know where to go. But the other side to this is that we have OEMs that sell to doctors, so the salespeople, and kind of like what Austin was saying, like who do you talk to a lot? It's the salespeople in those OEMs because they're the ones that are in front of the doctors. They're the ones getting the feedback from the doctors. But then also, I don't know if you guys heard about the 11-year-old girl, Kylie, from Connecticut, who developed the chemo backpack, and she got a patent for it. I'm actually her project manager, and so we're calling on hospitals all over the U.S. to get the model numbers and for the pumps that are used in the backpack. So instead of them wheeling IV poles around, they can carry a little backpack instead when they're getting chemotherapy for cancer. And so we work with a lot of devices that we have to talk to the doctors. And so there's a lot of surgeons, especially at conferences, and the pediatric space is small. Everyone kind of knows everybody too, so kind of once you're in, you get referred, and LinkedIn has been amazing. So LinkedIn I'd recommend it for everyone. The CEO of LinkedIn actually has me blog posting on this because this actually was generated because of LinkedIn. So that's a really good tool to find people.
Two things totally unrelated in a certain sense. Number one is my wife is the CFO of the state of Minnesota's Health and Human Needs Department. You should call.
Okay.
The other thing, and this is not a criticism, this is just an observation. Your slides, your font is really bad.
Thank you. It's actually the font of the website and like the...
You can change that too.
Tell my marketing company that. Give their names since I'm on camera, but. Anything else?
The last question we always ask is, what else can this community do for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we have two people here that, connections, and, we're really looking to work with, even marketing companies. I mean, they're getting on board, any company that could be related to the development process within the pediatrics. We're just talking to more people, getting more research, data, anything that is going to make this process easier because we have a long road ahead of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody for being here. My name is Lee George, I'm one of the organizers. Before we stop today, I wanted to just kind of get a feel for who's going to be around next Wednesday. It's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Are people going to be in town? Are people... So just a show of hands, who's going to be around that might come next week? We just kind of want to get a feel for if we should be hosting one or... All right. Yeah, it depends on who's speaking. Well, that brings us to another question. We are looking for speakers. So if anybody here is a startup and wants to present next week, otherwise Paul and I have been discussing some options for discussion or having someone give a more of a presentation style instead of kind of our normal 6-minute pitches too. So we'll keep you posted. I'll send out communications about that. Again, thanks for coming. Please stick around and network and talk to each other. There's plenty of coffee from City Kid Java. Social Enterprise do a lot of good work for kids, and we hope to see you all every Wednesday from here on out. Thanks again, and have a good day.
Thank you.